con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org.es, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last show for 2024. And it will be an interview with Scott Cossu. He's an Olympia, Washington-based pianist, composer, recording artist, host of a radio show, and film composer. He has been performing worldwide since 1980 and was one of the first artists to join the Windham Hill Records label, started by Will Ackerman. While on the label for 19 years before Windham Hill was sold to Sony, Cossu received stellar reviews for his 10 chart-topping albums and toured with label mates such as Michael Hedges, Alex DeGrassi, George Winston, and others. He has performed around the world and has very fond memories of sold-out shows in Spain, Canada, Costa Rica, England, Chile, Italy, and Germany, as well as many in the U.S., and his compositions have been included on dozens of Windham Hill samplers. Scott graduated from the Ohio University School of Music, as well as from the University of Washington with a degree in ethnomusicology. He will share that he visited Ecuador as part of his research for this. In 1990, Scott received the NAMA Music Award for Best New Age Music Act. In 2000, Scott was given the Achievement in Music Award from Ohio University, an honor given once a year to an OU graduate who has made outstanding contributions in music. He was thrilled to find out in 2010 that the world's largest printed music publisher, Hal Leonard, published a solo piano songbook which included Scott's composition, Purple Mountain, where he is in good company, being included with artists such as John Lennon, Beethoven, and Duke Ellington. Most recently, Scott recorded his 16th recording, Memories of Water and Light, a trio with piano, cello, Holly Reeves, and guitar with Dan Manacas, who has been with him for basically this whole century. And it is his second recording on the Hard Dance Records label. His first Save in Your Arms was nominated for Best Piano with Instrumentation in 2015 by Zone Music Reporter. And he has been nominated twice by One World Music Radio for a Lifetime Achievement Award. Scott continues to perform and compose new music, tour, and enjoy life with his family in the Pacific Northwest. So this is our last show of 2024, and it will also be the last show for our radio program for New Age, because I need a break. I need to focus on my job and my work, and therefore I've decided that for 2025 I will do the show whenever I have time, because it requires a lot of energy, a lot of hours to prepare for the show, and therefore I will see whenever there's enough time for me to do a show or to continue with the video blogs in Spanish or in English about any subject that comes around. But I won't be consistent from now on with the show regularly each week. So I invite you to enjoy this show, and remember that every single show we've done in 2024 has been uploaded in our YouTube channel, and also you can listen to it in Spotify or iVoox. We have some shows from the artist uploaded to Vimeo because for copyright reasons we cannot upload the full show with the music to our YouTube channel. But you can listen to the full shows, including the music, in Spotify or iBooks. I know that this has been an interesting year in regards for our program. We've been able to interview at least 12 to 13 New Age artists from the, I call it the age of gold for the New Age world back in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so this year was full of emotions that I was able to share with the audience, interviewing the musicians. Some interviews were really, really long, so we divided in two parts the interviews because, what can I say? We enjoyed so much the conversation with the different musicians that they were kind enough, like, for instance, I remember, and I want to share this with you, I had been in pause from the program for a long time, and so what I did when I came back is just continued with it, but I had forgotten little details. As, for instance, when I started interviewing, I forgot to tell the musicians that I needed at least 1 hour for the interview, and that I needed for it to be in a computer or whatever. So when I was accepted to interview Lorena McKenna, I forgot to tell her these details. And so I was in the interview with a friend of mine that lives in Canada and has been in closer relationship with Lorena's life. And the interview was so much fun, but Lorena had an appointment. So she said, oh, my God, I don't have the time right now because I have these appointments, but I would like to do it again. So she gave us another date for the second part of the interview, which was so much fun. And what I can tell you is that I guess part of the reason why it was so fun to do these interviews because I prepared. I had to listen to every single song to choose for the show and research and remember many things related to the days when I did the show and when I heard New Age back in the days. And so all of the musicians that I interviewed were so happy that we got to know the music, the stories, and everything. So it was so amiable. It was so much fun that it was very hard to just quit the interview do a very small program with interviews, mainly because for those who do not know the music, it was fun to present the music. And those who know the music, it was fun for them to re-listen to the songs. And we have segments with 3 or 4 songs after each part of the interview that we focus on each album. Anyways, for me, it's been such an honor to be able to interview them all. And that all the ones that I was able to interview. There were so many more that I was unable to reach and be able to present. But I think that a great part of artists that were very important during the 80s for this musical movement were part of the show this year. So in our webpage, radioserenidad.com, are the shows in these different platforms that have been uploaded. So you can watch, download in Vimeo. You can download the full videos and watch them at your own time. I know that some of them ended up being very long interviews, but it's worth for those who love this music and want to know more about the artists behind the music. It's a lot of fun to be able to give yourself the time to listen, even if it's your on the background and you are just gonna listen to it. You can download it from Spotify or listen from there. But this is recorded for the history of this music that for some reason or another, for this year, it was important for me to redo the show. And with this technological progress, I was able to contact most of the musicians that accepted the interview. I was really surprised that some of them said yes. And so I invite you to please help us in sharing the interviews with other people that like this music and want to know more about the artist. Share it because, to tell you the truth, economically, I have been unable to invest in spreading the word. This has been a completely heartfelt program with no economic support. So it's been very hard to sustain the program because the production takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. And so the best way that we can get support for this is that people share the program with other New Age lovers. I know that this is not a musical genre that is so famous that you have billions and billions and billions of listeners, but there's a lot of people that really enjoy, and we need this music in our lives for what it gives us in every single way, the relationship to the inner peace and calmness and nature. And I'm not talking about nature sounds, I'm talking about the softness and the beauty and the sensitivity of these artists behind their creations. So I'm glad that I was able to finally get Scott on the show, and he is going to be our last guest for the program this year. We've been able to do 40 shows. Out of them, almost half of them, less than half of them have been interviews to composers and musicians. So it's been a really cool year, and I will try to contact more musicians and do a show whenever it is possible to do it. So thank you. Enjoy the show. Share it with other people as well as the other shows. All of them have amazing music that is worth knowing them and knowing the music behind these amazing people that we've been able to offer in the show this year. So after this brief pause, we will come with Scott to the interview, and we will share his music for the 20th century. Thank you.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como Ngoypas R, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much for accepting this interview. And you got lots of fans all over the place. And as you probably read the messages people left in the Windham Hill Facebook page, so I'll share with the audience some of the comments and questions people did.
Okay.
So before we start all the way in your process of the music you've created, can you share with us why you chose the piano as your major instrument?
I sure will. I was a teenager, and my father bought an antique real old grand piano for us kids to be musicians, so we could enhance our life. And I was playing it kind of as a good child, but I wasn't really inspired until I heard "Light My Fire" by the Doors.
Good.
And I wanted to learn the piano part, and I learned it. And my dad said, "Scott, it's just a hobby. Stop playing it so much." And so I got to, because mostly in the 60s, most of the bands were led by guitars. So my mom helped me get an electric piano, and I stayed with the piano because it was a good instrument I became a composer, and I was inspired by Elton John and Billy Joel.
Great.
Those guys were.
Yeah. Now, you became a composer. That means you studied music.
I started writing music on the piano because I had all these influences from classical, and I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio. So I was really influenced by Detroit, Motown, and Memphis, the blues, and rock and roll mixed with all that, mixed with classical music.
What a mixture.
Yeah.
Interesting mixture. Like ELO House, I was listening today as I came to work, Roll Over Beethoven from ELO that has exactly that. Yeah, I mean, it's like classical music and suddenly rock and roll, it's interesting mixture. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then I went to college, to University of Washington, and I studied ethnomusicology, world music.
Mm-hmm.
And my teachers, my first year in order, I was in a Thai music ensemble from Thailand. I studied with 3 Romanian gypsies. I was in a Vietnamese ensemble, and I studied Indian music. And none of this was with the piano. My secondary instrument was the flute. So I played lots of flutes, but it crept into my inspiration as a pianist, and I started writing music that was influenced by all these styles. And it just led to this is before the words New Age were even used. I think John Fahey and maybe Andreas Vollenweider, a couple people were doing it, but it wasn't really a popular thing. And Windham Hill had only begun in the late 70s, and
I know, yeah, but before you go to the Windham Hill place where definitely want to ask you, I want to know chronologically, because you told me you came to Ecuador to do like a research.
Yeah, it was a graduate research for a thesis on the music of Ecuador, and I concentrated on the 3 different areas. I went to Esmeraldas on the coast, and I wanted to get the
marimba,
and it was the combination of black music on the coast mixed with the Spanish music mixed with the jungle music.
Wow.
And so I documented that, and then I went to the high Andes and documented the Hoja.
The hoja is like a leaf, right?
Yeah, it's like a leaf.
And you mentioned something about Wynton Marsalis and how the leaf sounded like.
It's like most people just get a buzz on it, and that's about all they can do is just make a sound. But these guys were so incredibly well trained. They could play melodies and solos on them, and it was a dying tradition. It doesn't exist very many places in the world outside of Ecuador.
How sad.
I went to document it.
Wow, how cool! I'm glad you came and you experienced the Andean music, which has very special instruments, like zampoña and charango and la hoja that you just mentioned.
And also, I played the panpipes too. I have some of those.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'm glad that you came by, and you mentioned it was a great experience that when you came back in the early 70s, I imagine.
It was 77.
Oh, 77. Wow, that's great. So how do you define your music style when you started composing? Like when you started composing and playing music, did you define it somehow in any genre, or
Well,
how was that?
I have a joke for you. Remember Michael Hedges?
Yes, of course.
Michael, he and I came out on the label the same year, 1981, the same time.
Uh-huh.
We used to tour together, and this NPR station was asking us the same question you did. How do we define our style? And Michael said he was really, really influenced by Igor Stravinsky and the Grateful Dead.
What a mixture again.
And I told them I was equally influenced by Frederick Chopin and Pink Floyd. And
How
that
can you
guy said,
define that?
and the interviewer said, we don't know what to put you guys in. And Michael says, put us in the heavy mental category.
Oh, wonderful, heavy mental. Yeah. How was your experience with Michael Hedges? As a matter of fact, somebody, I don't remember the name right now, but somebody in the Windham Hill Facebook page wanted me to ask you about your relationship with Michael Hedges.
Yeah, the words New Age had just come out, and George Winston was starting to get famous, but he was still, it was small pockets. And we were doing these little events together, and Michael, because he grew up, I don't know if you know, he was from Oklahoma originally. And then he went to Peabody Institute and graduated. He was a composer, but he was an innovator. And because of my innovations with having world music mixed with blues and jazz and rock and classical, we just kind of became buddies, and we started touring together. And
But he's not in your albums. I mean, in the Win, he doesn't appear in your albums.
no, we didn't play on each other's recordings because it was just a different style that we didn't. But we used to play encores together. We'd do concerts, and we'd always do like a Grateful Dead song or something for an encore.
How fun! How fun! Yeah, I'm
So,
glad
we
you mentioned
were
him.
very good friends.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's very well missed, and he was very ingenious in what he did with the finger style.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, that aerial boundaries is just heaven on earth. It's like out of this place, out of this world,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And okay, so now I would like to know how your collaboration with Windham Hill started.
Okay, that's a fantastic question. It was 1978. I was a graduate student at the University of Washington in Seattle, and Will Ackerman and Alex DeGrassi were coming to Seattle to give a concert at the university, and they wanted a piano player to play in between the two guitar players. And I said, okay, I'll do it, but I don't know who these guys are, but I'll do it. I never heard of them before. And because Windham Hill only had 3 albums, one by Will, one by Alex, and one by Bill Quist, I think. But Will he was still a building construction,
Yeah.
and he had his business card said William Ackerman, President, Windham Hill Builders, and in real small print, and Records. So I remember him from. That's how we got started. And here's the funny part. He called me about a year later and said, Scott, I got a new guy coming out on the label, and I'd like him to come to Seattle and open a concert for you because nobody knows who he is yet. And I said, well, we're friends, right? And he said, yeah. I said, well, if nobody knows him, he can't help me sell any tickets. And he said, yeah, I know, but if you don't have to pay him. Just give him a few minutes. That'll really help me. I said, what's his name? And he says, well, nobody knows him. His name is George Winston.
Amazing. And
So George came and we did these concerts. Have you ever seen George live?
I've seen the videos. I mean, not live, but I've seen the videos.
Because he never wore socks or shoes.
Oh, cool.
And he just drove. So we went on a little tour together. We became friends, and we went on tour in California in his Volkswagen Beetle with vinyl in the back seat before cell phones.
And
And he came and he went to a payphone. He came back. He said, "Scott, big news. I'm getting famous." I said, "What are you talking about, George? We're all getting famous, aren't we?" And he said, "No." He says, "You know those stations that play ambient music at night?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, they're playing my Autumn album a lot." So he says, "Because I'm getting a lot of notoriety, let me produce your first album for Windham Hill." So he produced Wind Dance, my first album. That's
no,
how
the wasn't Still Moments the first album?
No, that was not for Windham Hill. That was with
Oh, okay.
another label in Seattle.
Yeah.
Because you remember, I didn't want to sign with Will Ackerman. He was a building contractor.
Yeah, I remember. What a story is the one of Windham Hill. It's just amazing.
So yeah, George produced it, and then 1981, November of '81, and then that's when it all started getting exciting.
Amazing all that happened during the late 70s and the 80s. The 80s was just a boom with this music. So it's amazing.
Oh, by the way, that first recording, Still Moments, that first one, that was re-released by Windham Hill on their.
It was. Yeah, it was.
Part.
It was. So how did Still Moments come about? I mean, what can you tell us about, like, for instance, Ode to Shiva? I mean, it's like so cool. And we're going to have Ode to Shiva and Daybreak Angelina.
Those are great. So here I was in graduate school studying with all these gypsies and Thai people and Vietnamese musicians. And I had a colleague in college who started a recording studio, and he looked at me, he said, "Scott, I know you want to document some of your music, and I know you're on food stamps, so I know you can't afford music, so I'll just charge you $5 an hour, and I'll let you record." And I got all these people, and I borrowed some money from friends, and I made this recording, not to be in the record business, but just to document my influences at the time. And I met a friend who had a friend who knew somebody who had a little record company in Seattle, and he went down and she told me to go talk to him, and I did. And he said, "Oh, you're a friend of Susan's. Let me hear what you've got. Listen to this." So he puts in my cassette, and he looks at it, and he has this look like a record producer, and I'm going. He looks at it and he goes, "Scott, this is not radio friendly." But NPR would like this because it's so different with kind of instrumentation. And then he signed me to release Still Moments. And then his name was Gil Bateman, and he worked for Windham Hill later on. He was friends with Will Ackerman too. So we all became a big family.
Yes. It was really special. That decade of Windham Hill, it was just too special.
Were you in Ecuador then?
I went to college in Fort Lewis College in Durango, and before I went there, when I was in school, I knew music about Vangelis and Jean-Michel Jarre and Guitaro. But when I went to college in 1980, there was only one record store in town, and I found George Winston's Autumn and all the Mannheim Steamroller Fresh Air albums. And so it was funny because when I was a teenager, my mom had the only FM station those days, which was the HCJB, which was an American sort of, I think it was religious station, but they put all instrumental music. And I remember listening in this station a song, and I went bananas, and I said, but I had no chance of calling the station. Those days, back in this was early 70s, and 74, 75, and so I just know that the song stayed in my head. and I didn't know what it was, but it stayed in my head. So years later, when I went to college and I was in Durango, I went to get a haircut, and in the place where I got a haircut, while I was getting a haircut, I heard the song again, the second time in my life, and I went bananas. I says to the lady, "What is this?" And she says, "Oh, that's Fresh Air." And I go, "Really? Do you think they'll have it in the record store?" And she says, "Oh, of course." So I went there, and they had 4 Fresh Air, and I had no idea which Fresh Air had this song. So I started buying Fresh Air 4, and then Fresh Air 3, Fresh Air 2, Fresh Air 1, and every month I would get a new, because I was a student. I couldn't afford it. It was a $20 album because they were special vinyl, and so they made special recordings, and so their albums were very too costly for a student. So I would buy one album a month. And the last album I bought was the one that it had the song I loved, but I was able to get the whole collection of albums plus George Winston, and then I started collecting New Age albums. And when I came back to Ecuador, I started doing my radio show with that kind of music. So so I've been listening all my life this music.
I love Durango, the Four Corners. That is one of the most beautiful areas.
Amazing.
Do you remember Bobby McFerrin?
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of his singers in his band lives in Boulder.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Beth Quist, and she has a 4-octave range.
That much?
Yeah,
amazing.
she said she played, and her group was with Bobby McFerrin. They call it Voicestra.
Wow.
And so anyway, she and the percussionists are in my Rockies band, and we tour through Colorado, and we play near Durango and Boulder and Denver, and so she doesn't sing. She doesn't sing any lyrics with me. She just sings
like
sounds
like background vocals, like sounds.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. 4 octaves. That's so unusual. Wow.
She looked at me and she said, "Scott, I really have your cello part down on this one. I'll sing it on the concert."
Oh, amazing. Well, let's go ahead and listen from Still Moments, your 1980 album, Ode to Shiva and Daybreak Angelina, and we'll be back for Wind Dance, your actual first Windham Hill recording. Okay, great.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
Okay, now, in Wind Dance was your actually first album in Windham Hill.
Yes.
I was wondering how did you evolve from your first album to create this album, Wind Dance? What's the story behind Wind Dance?
Okay, what I did, Gloria, is I was really very excited about my musical ability to compose music, but I wasn't really thinking it was a career yet as a composer. I just thought it would be a good hobby. But then I started writing music that really it felt like it had substance to it, because I was still studying, I was still playing Chopin, I was still playing blues and jazz, and it just all kind of melted together into a style which nobody knew what to call. And it ended up being called New Age ambient music. But when George Winston heard my music, that song, he said, "Scott, I think we can," because he was playing my music at his concerts. He had this ability to not play it perfect, but he could kind of pick up what I was doing. And so the piece Purple Mountain, he started playing it at his concerts, and he said, "This could be a hit, Scott. I think we should and he coached me with how to make my songs more friendly for not for radio but for continuity.
Mm-hmm.
And since I already knew Will, and I became, I forgot to tell you, at that concert that I met Will Ackerman and Alex Scott, Alex and I became really musical friends, and we started playing music together and doing concerts. And then he played on Jamaica and Purple Mountain, and that was such a captivating sound with his guitar that it really caught the ears of a lot of radio people, NPR kind of stuff. And even though there wasn't really a market for it, there was shows that started coming up once a week on commercial stations that would call it. They didn't even call it a new age show; they called it an acoustic alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I started getting some of that, and Wind Dance was just an evolution of my composing world, and I think I'm sure glad I had that experience when I did.
Yeah. What do you recall about Jamaica, Kinza, and the actual Wind Dance, the songs?
That's a really good question. Okay. Do you remember back in those days where you could buy $299 airplane ticket for $299?
Very old days.
And you could go anywhere you wanted for 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a concert in Tennessee, and then with Michael Hedges, and then I had 5 days off. Then I had to play in Atlanta. So I said, where am I going to go for 5 days? So I put my finger on the map, and it came down on Jamaica. So I went to Jamaica, and I started hearing some of the music. And reggae music wasn't what I heard down there. It was more like a folk music style, and Jamaica was kind of an evolution of listening to that folk music of Jamaica, and that's how the song came about.
And how about Kinza? Kinza.
Ah, that's a good one. Kinza. Remember, I was studying when I studied with the Romanian Gypsies. I also took a course in African music, and I got excited about some of the rhythms of the African marimbas, and that kind of is inspired by the African marimba style.
Yes, that's amazing. Exactly. This is when Alex de Grassi joined, and he was in a couple of your albums, I remember.
Yeah, he played on the Reunion album. He played on too.
Yeah, that's right. So do you enjoy playing with other musicians? Do they bring a lot of feedback to your musical arrangements?
Yes, I do, because I hear so many different parts that I can't play.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to, because I've always, since I've studied classical, I was really influenced by the use of cello.
Mm-hmm.
And I started adding cello, and then Will Ackerman, in 1982, this Paul Winter concert came to Seattle.
Wow.
And I went to the concert, and I had written a piece called Fawn on the Islands album, but there wasn't any cellist around that I could find that could play that improvisational style and classical. And I heard Eugene Friesen, he was with Paul Winter, and we became friends. And so when I went back to New York to do Islands, I needed a cellist, and I asked him if he could play, and he said, he came in and he did it, and we became friends, and he played on Fawn.
Oh, yeah.
And Will Ackerman was so impressed with it that he asked me if I could do a whole album of just cello, mostly featuring piano and cello. And then guess what? Will Ackerman moved back to Vermont, and his neighbor was Eugene Friesen.
Amazing. What a coincidence.
So back in the late 80s when we did this is before vinyl was still being pressed, but not much digitally. So we did this as a digital vinyl album and a CD. And Reunion was such a heroic effort.
Yes, we're gonna talk about Reunion, but first we're gonna listen to music from Windance, and these three songs I mentioned, Jamaica, Kinza, and Windance. And we'll like to talk a little bit about an album you launched that was not in Windham Hill in 1983, which is Spirals. And then, yeah, remember that? We'll be back and talk. Let's get to the music, and we'll be back to talk about it. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces, este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Respira profundo y fluye con New Age.
Okay, so in 1983, you launched Spirals. What was that project about? It was not a Windham Hill album.
No, the same record label that released
Still Moments.
Still Moments wanted me to do a second album, and Windance hadn't come out yet, so I wasn't really a Windham Hill artist yet. So I went ahead and made that at the same time, the same year I made Windance. And here's the funny part about it. Because I was so influenced by the jazz world, even though I was myself not trying to be like a jazz musician, but I was featuring saxophones and trumpets. And then I wanted to document that style, and I wanted a featured guest on the record, but I couldn't afford him because I was low budget. And somebody said, Scott, you know, there's this really, really great sax player teaching at Cornish in Seattle, and he used to be with Dexter Gordon's band. His name is Carter Jefferson. So you should talk to him. And I said, I went to Carter. I told him what I was doing. I said, I know I can't afford you. And he goes, yes, you can't afford me. But I like what you're doing. So if you give me a couple $100 and take me out to dinner, I'll do it. So I got Carter Jefferson to play on Spirals, and he was featured. And all of a sudden, Gloria, I have this renowned respect from the jazz world, but on the next cut, you would have a piece that had cello, piano, and Chinese zither.
Wow.
On the same album.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it was world music, but not called world music yet.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. So it was a project that was opening doors for you.
Yes, it was opening doors. And so I got into that jazz world without trying to be a jazz musician, but just talking, because on the same recording, Spirals had Indian tambora and all these real ethnic styles. Oh, I forgot to tell you about something with the Windance. When Alex DeGrassi and I were touring, Minneapolis became a big supporter of our music. And I became so well connected there that there's a radio station called The Breeze. And do you remember The Wave in Los Angeles?
No, I didn't listen to radio those days.
The Wave in Los Angeles was the real big music station that played smooth jazz. Mm-hmm. And even though that term was still an innocent term, the Breeze radio station was syndicated for 50 stations around the United States. And they asked me if I could host a Sunday morning 3-hour show called Wind Dance. And
So
I
that's
did.
where you got the name for the album. Is that so?
No, this is way afterwards.
Oh.
This is 88.
Oh, wow.
But the Seattle Times, they said that I love, because I really love Keith Jarrett's music.
Mm-hmm.
And they said I was influenced so much by him that I got a lot of respect for that world. And they said I was taken over for what he was trying to do with the piano. And Wind Dance was on for about a year, and then I don't remember what happened, because I don't know if you remember what happened to me. I got hit by a car.
I know. We'll talk about it later when we get to
Okay.
1989.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some gaps in your memory because of that. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Wind Dance, since it was syndicated for 50 stations, when I went to the hospital, I got fan letters from all these people who listened to my radio show.
Mm-hmm.
So many people liked it because I was able to interview recording artists from all over the world when I was on tour, and I would play those interviews on my radio show.
Amazing. How
Yeah, it
cool.
was-
Yeah, amazing. So in 1984, after Spirals, you gave us Islands.
Yes.
How do you feel that your music was evolving from Still Moments all the way to Islands?
That's a great question. Here's what happened. Since I was becoming I was becoming friendly with being on tour and playing with rhythm sections from people all over the country. I had met Mark Egan and Danny Gottlieb at the Bottom Line in New York City when Alex Degassi and I did a concert there, and they became friends with Alex and I. And then Mark said, "Scott, if you ever need somebody to play, I'm always with Pat Metheny now, but things could change, and if I have some free time, I'd like to play some of your music with you." And so I played Islands, and he left Pat Metheny, and I called him, and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." And so the piece Ohana became really very, very friendly to the radio world.
Yeah, it was.
But here's the funny part, because when I did the piece that with Eugene Friesen, Fawn, I needed a flute player, and
Dave Valentine.
yeah, and Steve Miller, who produced the album, knew everybody in New York City. And you ever meet those people who they're in a good mood, but they don't look like they're in a good mood?
Yeah, couple.
Steve Miller had that New York look. The New York look I talk about is he always looked like he just missed a cab. So, but he said, he looked at me and he said, "Scott, I think I got somebody for you. I got the best flute player in New York City. He's from Puerto Rico and he plays salsa, but he's also classically trained, Dave Valentine." And so Dave Valentine and I became friends, but he looked at me and he said, "Scott, I know you're not Puerto Rican, but I think I can do a good job for you."
Nice, and he was with you in several albums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Switchback was my all-time, one
Yeah.
of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, but I mean, Islands. I mean, exactly. One of the fans. Let's see. I'll tell you what. I have some messages from your fans. Jim Horvath, a fan of the Windham Hill Facebook race, says that this album, Islands, the one that we're talking about, is one of his favorite Windham Hill albums, and he is just a great fan of yours. And what I noticed, your jazz influence is very notorious. I mean, the jazz elements in your music seem to be present in most albums. Yet you had a very nice way of intertwining New Age music style with jazz. How do you feel about these two genres and working to sort of mix them and make something? I don't know. I mean, like Pat Metheny has a piano solo with "Letter from Home," and you conceivably, he's a jazz rock artist and whatever. But this is totally like a very soft new age tone that is amazing. So I was wondering how you intertwine those genres in your music.
That's so good a question. The reason I can do it is because when I was a teenager, remember, I was really inspired by the Doors and Light My Fire. So I got really free and confident with my ability to play in rock and roll bands. And that freedom lifted me up. So when I started doing jazz, I didn't think of it as I just thought of it as an extension of rock and roll from a different era. And when you grow up in Ohio in the Midwest, you don't get introduced to jazz much.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wanted to make me suffer, you would make me listen to clarinet solos by Benny Goodman.
Wow.
I wasn't interested in that, but I was really interested in the Latin jazz, like Horace Silver, and as you know, George Winston was really influenced by Vince Guaraldi.
Uh-huh.
So it was a playful, fun kind of jazz that it just had a lot more energy that it couldn't fit into any other style.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then the radio people call it smooth jazz.
Yeah,
So
that's true. It was very
I didn't-
difficult, actually, to channel in one specific genre for people to connect with. But I think although New Age is a term most people dislike and have a good, they don't have a good relationship with. For me, from my perspective, my experience being not from the States, it was a perfect term to bring the world, bring world music, jazz, Celtic music, Andean music, and all the world music together, and obviously original instrumental music. So he did.
And I think
he did something good.
in the early '80s, it was an innocent new term, and
Yeah.
I think when massage therapists started using it a lot, I think it became associated with
with like not original like the music that you guys do, but like soft, relaxing music, which is also it's also like if we talk about like for instance classical music, you have in classical music different styles and different like musicians and composers for that era that did something different. And I think that maybe in the New Age world, there was the original compositions that, had a lot of soul. And then another part of it was all this soft music that ended up being the cliche to which New Age term really hang into. But I think that's a little unfair because it's just a little part of it.
Yes.
So, Jeffrey Smith from the Windham Hill fan page, he also wants to know about your relationship with Dan Gottlieb that started as well with Mark Egan because they were both part of the Pat Metheny projects and it started in Islands in this album. Do you recall anything about it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
Dan Gottlieb?
Oh, yeah. Danny Gottlieb, the drummer.
Excuse my English. Yeah. He was also part of the Pat Metheny project.
Yeah, he was the drummer. So the rhythm section of Mark Egan and Danny Gottlieb, they came together and when they started playing, they were really inspired by Dave Valentine because they hadn't worked with him. But they were New Yorkers. I remember Danny Gottlieb said, "Scott, you make me smile. Drummers don't smile much, but you make me smile."
How neat. So, Joseph Roth wanted to know about the collaboration with Eugene Friesen that you already mentioned, which is great. You get ahead of my questions. That's wonderful. And from this album, we're going to play Ohana and Oristana Sojourn. That I mean, they are amazing tunes. Any song stories about these two songs?
Yes, in fact, when I went to Oristano on the coast of Ecuador, Italy, on the coast of Italy,
Uh-huh.
I was living on an island, Vashon Island, outside of Seattle, and I had all these inspirations from islands, and I recorded it on the island, Manhattan, and I'd been touring in Hawaii. I had all these Corsica, Italy. It just seemed like a real identity that I needed to document, and so I just called it Islands. And Ohana, I don't know. Do you know what that means?
No.
That means hello, family in Hawaiian,
Oh, neat.
which is another island,
Uh-huh.
Hawaii. So all these islands just came together, and the theme was so friendly to me that it was not even I didn't have to think about it. This is what it is.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, amazing songs. I remember, I think this guy from Argentina, um, he mentions Devi in the whatever in the Windham Hill regarding some announcement of an award that he did about the reunion album. It's the one that we're going to listen next. So let's listen to Ohana and Oristano Sojourn, and we'll be back to talk about reunion.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como GoyPazR, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Abre las puertas de tu mundo interior y permanece con New Age.
As I mentioned earlier, Roberto, this fan from Argentina, has his this album Reunion, that the one we're going to talk about, as one of the top 5 in his collection, and he sends his regard. Also, Jean Parr wants to thank you for Sunnybell, a great song in this album. What can you tell us about Sunnybell?
It's another island off the coast of Florida. It's next to Fort Myers, Florida, and my family lived there, and I used to go there to visit. And it's just a sparkling, beautiful little island. It's not very big. And when I was really trying to feature the reason Reunion is the title of that, and I don't know why this happened, but I did not have a title track called Reunion. Just the reunion is when Will Ackerman met me in 1987 or at the university concert. I was performing piano and cello, a duet. And so the reason the name Reunion exists because I'm reuniting 10 years later, piano and cello.
Yes, and I must say, I don't know if this is spelled Wenlace, or how do you say
Wenlace.
Wenlace, okay. I can say is one of the most sensitive songs where you play with Eugene. And oh my God, it is amazing. And I know it was part of one of the Windham Hill samplers. A very amazing, touching, sensitive song. And Eugene and you just interact so fluently and so gently and softly. Wow, what can you share about this amazing song?
Since Eugene and I had only recorded once together on Islands with Fawn, but we knew each other's style. We knew, and we could be really loose in comedy with each other. And so Will said, this is before he had his studio, Imaginary Road. but he still had a place in Vermont, and he kept us really loose. And he said, Eugene's going to do a lot of classical training, and Scott, since you're classically trained, you guys can borrow each other's styles. And so we just played. We just kept having fun and kept relating, because the general look of classical musicians is one of very intense, very dedicated, but very intense look. I mean, it's not. It's the opposite of a blues musician or rock music, and so since we had such a friendly banter between us, and Will, here's one of the things Will said. We get a good take, and he goes, okay, that's good. Let's go shoot some basketball. Come on. So he would keep everything real light, and so nobody ever got too worried about, am I doing anything wrong and everything? Should I be doing this? It just all played into the friendly. We know how classical music works. We know how jazz works. We know how ambient works. And here it is, our style. And Gloria, I was at my peak of being able to combine all these styles. I didn't think about how do I combine classical and jazz and folk and classical and rhythm and blues. It just was all there at my fingertips. And I would sit down to practice, and I would come up and I'd say, wow, I just was going to practice scales. I have a new song.
Yeah. So, but what's the meaning of Wendy's? Is it a name of somebody's name? What does it mean?
It's an Irish name, and I just heard it somewhere and wrote it down for a song title.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was perfectly chosen because I mean, I don't know how, things in the universe work, but it's just everything is perfect about that song. The name, the piano, the cello, it's just the perfect song. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about another song we chose from this album. Who got married at Jenny Lake? What's that song about?
That was me, and I met somebody in Tennessee, and we were on a tour, and I was on a tour in Wyoming, and Jenny Lake was there, and we just said, let's get married at Jenny Lake.
Uh-huh.
It was just, the sun was shining in the right way, and we just said, okay. It wasn't a real marriage, but it was.
It was good for a song title. Yeah, so from this album, we're going to listen to Sunnybell, Gwenless, and Wedding at Jenny Lake.
Right.
We'll be back for your 1987 She Describes Infinity.
Oh, great.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Este es el espacio de New Age.
Oh, I forgot to tell you something very important.
Sure.
About Jenny. We had a child together, and her name is Jenny.
You mean you and Debbie?
No, this is Robin. She was the person I was with in Jenny Lake. I hadn't met Robin yet. I hadn't met Debbie yet.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
So I have a beautiful daughter named Jenny.
Uh-huh.
And she calls Debbie her bonus mom.
Oh, how cool. How nice. That's cool.
So
Yeah.
Jenny is very, she's very special, and she's almost 40, or she just turned 40. Do you know where Asheville, Tennessee is?
I know Nashville.
Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know where they had those floods?
Yeah.
She lived right there where the floods were, but she's okay.
Oh, gosh.
But she's been tested.
Yeah. It's been horrible all over the world. We are, as you know, we are suffering power outages of up to 12 hours a day because the droughts, there's no water in the dams. It's just crazy. The world is crazy.
Yes.
But we now have She Describes Infinity. What can you share about your musical evolution until this point and how this album was conceived?
Okay, this is the beginning of my relationship with my favorite duet partner in the world, Van Manakis.
Yep, I was going to ask you about that.
Van grew up in New York City
Mm-hmm.
area, and he here. This is a very funny way that we met. Michael Hedges and I were touring and we played a concert in Tennessee at Vanderbilt University, and the promoter was a big fan of mine, and he had a concert. He had a party afterwards, and I usually don't go to parties after concerts, but we went to this party, and Van Manakis was there because he was visiting some people in Tennessee, playing music with them down there. So he was um, at the party, and he knew Mark Egan and Danny Gottlieb. So he had been listening to Ohana and knew how to play it.
Oh, wow.
And I never even met him. And so there were some jam sessions at the party, and he was playing it, and I said, "Gosh, you play this music like you know it." And he said, "I've been around." And he was very, very humbling. He didn't talk big deal. He was had that New York look, like he just missed a cab.
Wow.
So then I got a phone call from a producer who had listened to my music from New York, and they loved what I was doing. They said they were doing a movie about Christo,
Yeah.
the middle artist, and they wanted me to do the soundtrack for it. And so I ended up doing it, but they told me, said, when they're wrapping the second part of the movie, they wrapped the oldest bridge in Paris called the Pont Neuf, but they needed a mandolin part. And so I had Van Manakis' phone number, and I called him. I said, "Van, I'm coming to New York to do this soundtrack, and I need a mandolin player. Can you suggest one?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Who would that be?" He says, "Me. I play mandolin too." So he said, "Also, if you need 12-string guitar, I can do that. A little bit of violin, dobro, 12-string." And he came, and you know how people in New York, if they're just studio musicians, they just have a different world way about them. They just do it. So he had that ability. So we did a soundtrack for the Christo movie, and then I had a concert on Long Island, and I asked him if he wanted to play with me since I was in New York. He said, "Yeah." And that was 30 some years ago. And he's been playing with me ever since. And
Yes, it's amazing. Beautiful that you mentioned, because I was going to ask you, since he's in basically all your albums. So
yeah,
this album again mixes jazz and new age tendencies very nicely. So what can you
yeah.
share about Bajoun Carnival, Angel Steps, and She Describes Infinity? Those are the songs
Okay.
we're going to play.
Okay. She Describes Infinity was my classical training of how I really felt about Brahms and Chopin. If they were alive 100 years later, that style they would play. And then I also did a soundtrack for a Volkswagen commercial, which was inspired by that style. But here's the other part. I went to college with a lady who she became friends, and she moved to Tallahassee. So I was touring there once in the 80s, and she said, "You should talk to my brother. He's really a good musician. He lives in Los Angeles, and his name is Tom Canning, and he was on tour with Al Jarreau, and he played with Wayne Shorter, and he was one of those guys that you never hear about, but he's on everybody's recordings. And he is a good producer, so he ended up producing she describes infinity. And so my rhythm section for Islands was Danny Gottlieb and Mark Egan.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, I got the perfect two musicians. Oh, you remember the term Bayesian Carnival? Do you know what Bayesian means?
I think it's related to some sort of food in Louisiana.
No, it's even better. This takes it to the islands of another area. Bayesian is Barbados.
Uh-huh.
So he says, I got your perfect Barbados rhythm section. I've got Alex Acuna and Abraham Laboriel, and they just left Weather Report, so they're free.
Uh-huh.
So they were provided that kind of that world beat sound without calling it world beat, world music, and everything. And Vamenak is 100% Greek. Alex is a Peruvian, and because I had been to Ecuador and lived in Ecuador, he and I became really good buddies.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said, you're a South American guy, I see. And then Abraham is 100% Mexican. So we were world beat musicians without trying to be world beat. We just were. And so she describes infinity, the song. Unfortunately, I have that amnesia from that accident, and I don't remember as much as I should, but he keeps coming back here and there.
Yeah, well, great. Let's listen then to this music, and then we'll be back for your challenging year in Jesus, I'm eating my tongue. Challenging year, 1989.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, great.
Permasalud Glamping Lodge te espera en la provincia de Imbabura, en Ecuador, para que te conectes con la naturaleza, recuperes energía y bienestar. Te ofrecemos domos full equipados y carpas de glamping con toda comodidad. Escoge entre paquetes básicos de estadía y paquetes completos que incluyen desayuno y acceso al área de nuestra piscina natural con baño turco e hidromasaje. ¿Necesitas un espacio de paz y tranquilidad? Entonces, este es el lugar preciso. Visita nuestra web permasalud.com o envíanos un mensaje de WhatsApp al 0999-203-203.
Estás escuchando New Age, el programa de la nueva era.
Okay, so Scott, 1989 was a very challenging year for you. Most Windham Hill fans remember your head injury while crossing the street. Jill Littlejohn, I don't know if you know her, remember
Yes.
her? She says that she often planned your trips and she could have avoided that accident. But, and Joanne Schnee wants to know about your relationship with Windham Hill after your injury. What happened in terms of your life when you had that accident?
Okay, that's such a good question because in 1989, I was at the peak of my career when Switchback came out. And then I go into the hospital and I'm in intensive care after getting hit by this car. Oh, I wanted to tell you why I was in LA, why I got hit. You remember that there was a TV show called 30 something? And they wanted me to do the music for that, for the TV show. So I was in LA visiting them. And I guess I was
Had a 40-city world tour planned.
I had a world tour planned in Alaska and all over America, and going back to Europe. I'd been to Europe the year before, and in Japan, which is my biggest, most loyal following, was Japan. And all of it came crashing down with this when I was hit by the car. And here's the good news. You know, when you have a dream in the middle of the night and you're really involved in the dream, and then you wake up and the dream's gone completely? I had like 40 years of that dream.
What do you
'Cause
mean?
it's-
I mean,
Well, I mean that I call it BI, before injury.
okay.
I'm like that dream. I don't remember. I had a hematoma on my brain, and I knocked out part of my memory my
Yeah.
memory glands. So I just couldn't remember a lot of my music, and I couldn't remember hardly anything about my why I wrote it. And then I jokingly say this: when I wrote all my music in the '80s and I was on tour, I should have write down in details just in case you get hit by a car.
Oh my God. So
I,
basically, what happened is what we have a saying in Spanish that says borra y va de nuevo, which means erase and start again. Everything's erased and start again. Because John Roth from the Facebook page, he believes that you have had to even relearn to play piano. Is that so? You had to learn to play
yeah,
piano again?
that was true. And my that tour in Spain and Europe that resumed in 1990, but I was still recovering. And Van Manakis, the genius he was, he used to look at me and he used to say, "Oh, we're doing that part again. Okay. Oh, you want me to solo here again? Okay. Okay, well, I'll do that." And it took about 3 years and then
Yeah.
to really recover. And then I met Debbie, and she helped me so much just getting confidence back. And
Wow, how neat! I'm glad she's there with you. And
yes.
so, what? Um, how did this accident define your life after it happened?
Okay, that's a great question because when people, I'm gonna, because of my memory loss, you know how the joke is when people say, "Oh, I'm so tired of that old song."
Yeah,
I don't ever have to worry about that.
yeah.
They're all new all the time.
But you remember so much about everything we've talked. I mean, it's
Yeah,
there. The memory's there about most of it.
yeah, and I've regained so much of my confidence and my memory that when composers talk about getting inspiration, I always say I got really, really, really inspired, but I don't recommend getting hit by a car to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm so thankful that I did not lose my ability to be a composer. I was
Hmm.
I lost a lot of stuff, and a lot of this music still comes back, but I don't worry about that anymore. I could be dwelling on what happened to me, but rather than do that, I just go
Go move
next,
forward.
moving on. Yes, moving forward.
You know, in many spiritual traditions, what they aspire to be able to do is to forget about everything that the past and just live in the moment, and you have
Yes,
that possibility, so it's a gift in one way or another.
yes.
So Switchback was in that year before the accident. Do you I mean, there's a song that I really, really like in this album, which is Manhattan Underground.
Ah,
But we're gonna play Desert Lightning, Switchback, and Manhattan Underground.
okay.
Um, any memories from these songs?
Well, the little bit of memory I have from Manhattan Underground was used to take the subway a lot when I was up there, and I said to Van, nobody ever writes the songs about the subway, and it was real jazzy. And I said, Manhattan Underground is the first for me. I'm talking. So it was just like a documentation of my time in New York City,
Oh wow, great.
and Switchback was because it's real jazzy. That um, I when I was doing that documentary about a Volkswagen commercial, it was in the country of Chile, and the switchback in Chile was where the Volkswagen were driving to showcase their ability to withstand very harsh conditions, and so I kind of made that as a little tribute to that to Chile on that one, and Manhattan and
Desert Lightning.
Desert Lightning was just my love of folk jazz. And
Hmm.
Dave Valentine said, He looked at me, he said, Scott, I'm going to give it a little Puerto Rican accent for you.
How cool. Well, let's listen to these songs and then we'll be back for Stained Glass Memories.
Okay.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como Ngoypas R, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad EC. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
So, in 1992, Stained Glass Memories has an interesting array of musicians like Dave Valentin, Van Manacas, Mark Egan, David Darling. How was it to unite all these musicians for this project?
Well, I was celebrating the fact that I was still alive because I had so much trauma in my life. And when I was a teenager in Ohio, I used to practice in this church. It was a real big church that my family was a member of. And they asked me if I could start playing music as the people came into church as a prelude to. And that church had these incredible stained glass, beautiful stained glass windows all over the church. So my tribute to Stained Glass Memories is I'm back, and this is where I started.
Great. We're going to listen from this album to Joanna Margaret, Old Man Mambo, and Cajun Kitchen Blues. And I guess I mixed the Bajun with the Cajun before you had a Bajun Carnival, and I mixed it with Cajun Kitchen Blues. Yeah, I mean, they relate. So we're going to listen to these songs, and we'll be back for Spirits Fly Again, your last album for this century.
Thank you.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Respira profundo y fluye con New Age.
So, Scott, the last album for last century was When Spirits Fly Again. But this album was with Alula Records. What happened? What happened to your relationship with Windham Hill by then?
Windham Hill, around that time, was sold to Sony RCA. So they stopped making records, and they said, it was nice having you guys, but Will said, I'm retiring. Of course, that didn't last long.
Yeah.
But no more Windham Hill. So Alula, Miramar was the label that I really signed with.
Uh-huh.
And then they were sold. And then Alula was a label out of Portland that was part of Allegro Distribution. And the person, you'll love this story. So Will Ackerman and I found this concert ticket from this promoter that started Alula. His name was Forrest Fabian. And he promoted Will Ackerman, George Winston, with special guest Scott Cossu in Portland, Oregon in 1982, $5.
Wow.
So we were really friends for years and years and years. And he said, Scott, I know Windham Hill got sold, but I'm starting a new label here at Miramar called Alula, and he signed me to do When Spirits Fly, which I did, and then that label, that company got sold, and the distribution company he was with, Allegro, started Alula, and he redistributed When Spirits Fly.
Wow. But how was the change of label? I mean, did the Alula fulfill your needs as a musician? Was it difficult to let go of the Windham Hill years?
Yes, it was very difficult, and still is, because we were so identified not as new age artists, but just as quality musicians, that we didn't have to worry about what they called us. For the new people on the world of radio, they just said, "Oh, you're a Windham Hill artist. Okay, I accept you."
Yeah, amazing, amazing.
They couldn't say, "Oh, you're an Alula artist." What does that mean?
Yeah, it was just very special what Will was able to accomplish with Windham Hill,
Yeah.
and this is amazing. So, as you envision your musical career for the 21st century, what was your main focus, given so many changes were happening in the industry? You've gone through this accident and so many things. Uh, did you have any project or vision as to where you were headed with your music?
I think I'm still trying to document some of my earlier music. When I did "Safe in Your Arms," that was nominated for a Grammy, and I was really pleased with that because I, Windham Hill, all the Windham Hill recordings were in the vault. And then one day I said to my wife, I said, I am the composer of this music. I can re-record it. It doesn't have to die. So I'm still composing, but I'm still want to make some more. I want to do another recording of captivating some of this music where it's gone and it's in a vault. It doesn't mean it's gone. It just means it's that version is gone.
Nobody can buy it.
Yeah, nobody can buy it.
Wow, amazing. So, like, what can you share about Spirits Fly, Come Home, and Hakone?
Hakone is a beautiful area of. It's a little town in.
Japan.
Oh, it's when I was telling you my biggest following is Japan.
Mm.
When I toured there and played there, Van Max and I played this beautiful place called Hakone. And so it's just a tribute to one of the more beautiful places that I've ever played. And we played Tokyo and Hakone, and they were just want to say, I remember you.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is the last album we're gonna listen to with the songs I just mentioned. When Spirits Fly, Coming Home in Hakone, with your music for the 20th century, and maybe we get together for the next the 21st century, because I have only 5 more minutes before the power outage. And so I wanted to thank you so much, Scott and Debbie next to you. Thank you, Debbie, for your support. If there's anything else you want to share with the audience and your fans.
Yes, I think it's very nice to be able to share with somebody who knows what I'm doing and make little sense of it. I would like to do another interview talking about the 21st century sometime. And my goal is just to keep documenting and composing and make sense of this crazy world that we live in, and try to make it a little friendlier, because I've always said that classical music is a really friendly music, but people don't know how to make it friendly in their lives because they never had to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to help you make it friendly.
Oh, how sweet. Debbie, anything you'd like to share with us?
No, we're just really lucky. I mean, he's really an amazing, kind, sweet man, and he plays the piano. I mean, we had a concert downtown the other night that was at maximum capacity, and people couldn't get in, and they just wanted to hear Scott play grand piano for an evening. And he loves it. He just loves it, and he does. And there's all ages, from 12-year-olds all the way up to people coming in with a walker. It's just everybody.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I'm so glad for that. That's great. Well, I'll get a hold of you because we're going to have a break during December. And so I need a breather. It's been a very intense year. And so we'll be back with the programs starting in January. And I will get back with you to do the 21st century musical journey with you. So
I
thank you so much.
look forward to it. Well, you're a gem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too. Until next year, have a great end of the what 2024, whatever.
Yeah.
Have a great year and happy Christmas. Until then,
You too.
bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org.es, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.